What would you do if your billionaire husband threw you out while pregnant for a business merger? Beg, cry, disappear quietly. Rebecca Sutton did none of those things. Instead, she called her brother a former NSA cryptographer who knew every digital secret Wall Street didn't want exposed. What happened next destroyed a $3 billion empire in 72 hours and changed divorce law across America. This story has everything: betrayal, hackers, federal crimes, and justice so satisfying you'll want to replay it. If that sounds incredible, smash that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories that'll restore your faith in karma. Now, let's dive in. The pregnancy test sat on the marble counter like an accusation. Two pink lines, 5 months along. Rebecca Sutton Barrett stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror of their $12 million Tribeca penthouse, trying to recognize the woman looking back. She'd taken 3 tests that morning, all positive, all confirming what she'd suspected for weeks, but had been too terrified to verify. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach, still flat beneath the silk robe Jordan had bought her in Paris last year. The hotel receipt crumpled in her other hand told a different story. Mandarin Oriental, presidential suite, charged to Jordan's black card 3 nights ago. The same night he'd texted her that he was sleeping at the office because of market volatility. Becca had found it that morning while looking for their insurance cards. She'd been having dizzy spells, needed to schedule a doctor's appointment. The receipt had fallen from his wallet along with something else. A business card. Vivian Aldridge, Chief Operating Officer. Aldridge Capital. Red lipstick stain on the corner. The sound of the front door opening made her jump. Jordan's voice carried through the penthouse, sharp and commanding as always. "Becca, you home." She tucked the receipt and pregnancy test into her robe pocket and walked out to meet him. Jordan Barrett stood in their living room, 6 feet 2 inches of tailored perfection, his dark suit probably worth more than most people's monthly rent. At 36, he'd built Quantum Edge trading from nothing into a $3 billion hedge fund. Forbes had called him the algorithm whisperer. Wall Street called him a genius. Becca had once called him the love of her life. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Jordan didn't look up from his phone. "Can it wait? I have a call with Tokyo in 10 minutes. "No, it can't wait." She pulled out the hotel receipt and placed it on the coffee table between them. "Whose lipstick is this?" For the first time in months, Jordan actually looked at her, really looked at her. His expression didn't change. No guilt, no panic, just cold calculation, like he was analyzing market data. "Sit down, Becca." "I don't want to sit down, and I want you to explain why you're charging hotel rooms when you supposedly slept at the office." Jordan set his phone on the table with deliberate care. "I said sit down." Something in his tone made her knees weak. She'd heard him use that voice with business rivals, with lawyers, with people he was about to destroy. Never with her. She sat. Jordan walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline. The afternoon sun painted him in gold, a king surveying his kingdom. "I've been seeing Vivian Aldridge for 8 months. The words hit like a physical blow. 8 months. Before she'd stopped taking birth control. Before he'd suggested they start thinking about family. Before everything. You've been... She couldn't finish the sentence. "Her father, Grant Aldridge, owns Aldridge Capital. We've been negotiating a merger. $2.5 billion. The deal of the decade." He turned to face her, and his eyes were stranger's eyes. "Grant is old school. He believes in family dynasties, in bloodlines, in keeping power consolidated. The merger is contingent on Vivian and me getting married." Becca's hand went to her stomach. "We're already married. That's a problem I'm solving." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. "My lawyers drew up a separation agreement, $2 million, full NDA. You sign, move out within 48 hours, and we both walk away clean." "I'm pregnant." The words came out as a whisper. Boy, Jordan's jaw tightened. "How far along?" 5 months. He closed his eyes briefly, and for 1 second, Becca thought she saw the man she'd married. The one who'd proposed to her on a Brooklyn bridge at sunrise. The one who'd promised to build a life together. Then his eyes opened, and the stranger was back. "That's unfortunate timing," he said, "but it doesn't change anything. I'll increase the settlement to $3 million. You will have full medical coverage for the pregnancy. After the birth, we'll work out on child support arrangements. Child support arrangements. Becca stood, her legs shaking. This is your baby. Our baby. It's a complication. Jordan's voice was flat, clinical. One I'm willing to compensate you for generously. But I need you to understand something. Becca, this merger with Aldridge Capital will create the most powerful trading firm on the East Coast. Vivian understands that world. She grew up in it. You're a wonderful person, but you don't belong in my life anymore. I gave up my career for you, Becca said, her voice rising. You told me I didn't need to work, that you wanted me to focus on us, on building a home, and I'm grateful for that, which is why I'm offering you $3 million. That's more than you'd make in 10 years at your old marketing job. You're buying me off like a business expense. Well, Jordan picked up his phone, already moving on. Be realistic. I have the best legal team in Manhattan. You signed a prenup. If you fight this, you'll spend everything on lawyers and end up with less than I'm offering now. Take the deal. Becca, it's the smart play. She stared at him. This man she'd shared a bed with for 3 years and realized she'd never really known him at all. What happened to you? Nothing happened to me. I'm the same person I've always been. You just chose to see what you wanted to see. He glanced at his watch. I have that call. Owen will coordinate the logistics of your move. Don't make this ugly. Think of your family's reputation. He walked toward his office, then paused at the door. One more thing. I had the penthouse deed transferred to my trust yesterday. Your name's been removed from all accounts pending asset division. You have 48 hours. Becca, use them wisely. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Becca stood in the middle of the living room, her living room, she'd thought, the home they'd built together, and felt the foundation of her entire life crack beneath her feet. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and dialed the one person who'd never let her down. Silas, she said when her brother answered. I need you. Paige Donovan's Williamsburg apartment was cramped, cluttered with journalism awards and half-empty coffee cups, but it felt safer than anywhere Becca had been in years. Her best friend since college had picked her up from the Tribeca penthouse 3 hours after the confrontation. No questions asked, just fierce loyalty and a spare bedroom. Now Becca sat on Paige's worn couch, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like lavender detergent, trying to process the wreckage of her life, while Paige paced the small living room like a caged tiger. I'm going to destroy him, Paige said for the third time. She was an investigative journalist for the Wall Street Journal, and right now she looked ready to burn down Manhattan to get a story. This is my beat, high finance corruption. I can have a piece ready by Friday exposing... No. Becca's voice was hoarse from crying. You can't write about this. Not yet. Becca, he threw you out while you're pregnant. He admitted to an affair. This is news. He'll say I'm a scorned wife making up lies. His PR team will destroy my credibility before your piece even goes live. Becca pulled the blanket tighter. I need to be smart about this. Strategic. Paige sat down beside her, taking her hand. Then let's be strategic. What do you need? A lawyer, the best divorce attorney in New York, who isn't already in Jordan's pocket. I know someone, Diane Fletcher. She handles high net worth divorces, wins most of them. Paige grabbed her laptop. But fair warning, she's expensive. I have some savings from before I married Jordan. About $60,000. It had seemed like a lot 3 years ago, back when she'd had a career in independence and a sense of self-worth. That'll get you in the door. I'll call her tomorrow morning. Paige hesitated. What about your family? Have you told them, Masoy? Becca shook her head. My mom will be devastated. She loved Jordan, thought he was the perfect son-in-law. The irony was bitter in her mouth. And Silas is in Austin. I don't want to drag him into this mess. Silas would want to know. Silas would fly here and probably try to punch Jordan. Or worse, hack into his systems and land himself in federal prison. Her older brother had worked for the NSA for 6 years before going private as a security consultant. He had skills that terrified Becca when she thought about them too hard. Paige's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and frowned. Speaking of your soon-to-be ex-husband, did you see this? She turned her laptop around. The screen showed a New York Times business section article posted 20 minutes ago. Quantum Edge Trading announces major merger with Aldridge Capital. Becca's stomach twisted as she read. The article detailed a $2.5 billion deal that would create the most formidable algorithmic trading firm on the Eastern Seaboard. There was a photo of Jordan and Vivian Aldridge shaking hands, Gran Aldridge beaming between them like a proud father. He didn't waste any time, Paige muttered. Becca stared at Vivian in the photo. She was beautiful in that polished, corporate way, sharp cheekbones, expensive highlights, a smile that probably calculated compound interest while flashing at cameras. Everything Becca wasn't. I met her once, Becca said quietly. At a charity dinner 6 months ago. She was charming, funny, asked about my art collection, seemed genuinely interested. She laughed, a broken sound. He was probably already sleeping with her then. Hey, Paige gripped her hand harder. You didn't do anything wrong. He's a sociopath who traded his family for a merger. That's on him, not you. But Becca couldn't shake the feeling that she should have seen it coming. The late nights, the distraction, the way Jordan had stopped really looking at her months ago, like she'd become background furniture in his life. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Mrs. Barrett, this is Lucas Brennan. I'm representing your husband in your separation. The formality in his voice made her skin crawl. Ex-husband. Technically, you're still legally married, which brings me to why I'm calling. Mr. Barrett is willing to increase his offer to $4 million if you sign the agreement by end of business tomorrow. He wants to make this as painless as possible for everyone involved. Painless, Becca repeated. Is that what he calls throwing out his pregnant wife, Miss Barrett? I understand you're emotional. Don't, her voice went cold. Don't patronize me. Tell Jordan I'll sign something when hell freezes over. She hung up and immediately regretted it. Paige was right about one thing: she needed to be strategic, not emotional. Hanging up on his lawyer wasn't strategic. That was stupid, she said aloud. No, Paige corrected. That was self-respect. There's a difference. She closed her laptop. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we call Diane Fletcher and start building your case. Jordan Barrett thinks he can buy his way out of being a decent human being. Let's prove him wrong. But as Becca lay in Paige's spare bedroom that night, listening to Manhattan traffic through thin walls, she couldn't shake the terrible certainty that Jordan had already won. He had money, power, the best lawyers money could buy. All she had was the truth. And in her experience, the truth rarely beat a good legal team. Diane Fletcher's office occupied the 42nd floor of a midtown high-rise with views that made Becca dizzy. The divorce attorney herself was a woman in her late 50s, silver hair cut in a sharp bob, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Becca's wedding dress had. Tell me everything, Diane said, pen poised over a legal pad. And I mean everything. No detail is too small or too embarrassing. That's how we win these cases. For the next hour, Becca laid out her marriage like an autopsy. The whirlwind courtship 4 years ago, Jordan's insistence that she quit her marketing job at a boutique agency where she'd been rising fast. The prenup she'd signed a week before their wedding. She'd been so in love, so certain that money didn't matter when you had each other. She'd been 26 and stupid. The prenup is a problem, Diane admitted, flipping through the pages Becca had brought, but not insurmountable. You didn't have independent legal counsel when you signed. We can argue it was signed under duress, that you were pressured by the time constraints and emotional manipulation. Can we really win that argument? Diane's smile was sharp. I've won tougher cases. New York State doesn't look kindly on prenups that leave one spouse destitute, especially when there's a child involved. You're pregnant, which works in our favor. Courts tend to sympathize with pregnant women who've been abandoned. Hope flickered in Becca's chest. So what's our strategy? We file for divorce immediately, request temporary spousal support and child support. Document everything, every text message, every email, every financial transaction. If your husband is having an affair with Vivian Aldridge, we need proof. Photos, correspondence, witnesses. I have hotel receipts. That's a start, but we need more. Does he have any business associates who might be willing to talk? Anyone who saw them together in compromising situations? Becca thought of Owen Hartley, Jordan's COO and best friend since their Princeton days. Owen had always been kind to her, but his loyalty was to Jordan. I don't know, maybe. Find out. Meanwhile, I'll start discovery proceedings. Your husband's financial records, his company's books, everything. If there's dirt to find, we'll find it. What about the merger with Aldridge Capital? Can we use that? Diane's eyes lit up. Absolutely. If we can prove the affair predates the separation, and that this merger was his motive for ending the marriage, that's abandonment, potential fraud. The court will take a very dim view of a man who discards his pregnant wife for a business deal. For the first time in days, Becca felt like she could breathe. How long will this take? High net worth divorces 6 months to a year? Minimum. But we'll push for temporary support immediately. You shouldn't have to drain your savings while he's living in luxury. Becca signed the retainer agreement, watching her bank balance drop from $60,000 to $45,000 in a single signature. It felt like jumping off a cliff and hoping the parachute would open. As she was leaving, Diane stopped her. Mrs. Barrett, Becca, I want you to prepare yourself. Your husband has resources, connections. He's going to fight dirty. Whatever you think you know about him, however ugly this might get, it's going to get uglier. Can you handle that? Becca thought about the stranger in her living room 3 days ago, the man who'd called their baby a complication. I don't have a choice. Good, because neither does he. We're going to make him pay for every single thing he's done. Walking out of Diane's office, Becca felt something she hadn't felt since finding that hotel receipt. Power. Not much, just a small flicker, but it was there. She had a lawyer. She had a plan. She was fighting back. Her phone buzzed with a text from Paige. Check page 6. Becca pulled up the gossip site and felt her newfound confidence evaporate. Hedge fund hottie Jordan Barrett splits from wife. Already dating KOO Vivienne Aldridge. Sources say marriage was on the rocks for months. Friends describe ex-wife as increasingly unstable. There were photos. Jordan and Vivienne at a restaurant. Becca recognized the French place in Soho they'd gone to for their second anniversary. Jordan's hand on Vivienne's back, her laughing at something he said. The date stamp on the photos 2 months ago. The article painted Becca as a clingy wife who couldn't handle her husband's success. Anonymous sources, probably Jordan's PR team, described her as emotionally volatile and resistant to therapy. When there was even a quote from someone claiming to be a former friend, she always seemed jealous of Jordan's female colleagues. This split was inevitable. Becca read it 3 times, each word another knife between her ribs. Her phone rang. Diane Fletcher. I just saw page 6, the lawyer said without preamble. This is exactly what I warned you about. He's controlling the narrative, making you look unstable so when we file for support, he can claim you're not fit for custody. But none of it's true. Truth doesn't matter in public relations. Perception does. We need to move fast. I'm filing the divorce petition today instead of next week. And Becca, don't talk to any reporters. Don't post on social media. Don't give them any ammunition. After she hung up, Becca stared at her phone. She had 300 new Instagram followers. The comments on her last post, a photo of a sunset from 2 weeks ago, had exploded with cruelty. Gold digger finally getting what she deserves. Poor Jordan, trapped with a crazy wife. She looks basic anyway. Vivienne is an upgrade. She deleted Instagram, then Twitter, then Facebook. But she couldn't delete the truth that was settling into her bones. Jordan wasn't just leaving her. He was erasing her, rewriting their history so cleanly that by the time their divorce was final, no one would remember she'd ever mattered at all. That night, lying in Paige's spare bedroom, Becca finally called her brother. Silas, she said when he answered. Remember when you said if anyone ever hurt me, you'd make them regret it? Who do I need to hurt? His voice went from sleepy to alert in an instant. Jordan, he's destroying me, and I don't know how to fight back. There was a long pause. Then Silas said, I'm booking a flight. I'll be there tomorrow. You don't have to. Yes, he interrupted. I really do. Nobody hurts my sister. Nobody. The mediation office was designed to look non-threatening, soft gray walls, comfortable chairs, a mahogany conference table meant to suggest cooperation rather than warfare. Becca sat beside Diane Fletcher, her hands clasped in her lap to keep them from shaking. Across the table, Jordan sat flanked by Lucas Brennan and another lawyer she didn't recognize. Both men in suits that cost more than most people's cars. Jordan hadn't looked at her once since walking in. He stared at his phone, occasionally murmuring to Lucas, as if Becca were just another item on his calendar between conference calls. "Thank you all for coming," the mediator began. "I'm hoping we can reach an amicable agreement today that serves everyone's best interests, particularly the child's." Diane opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick binder. "We have documentation of Mr. Barrett's affair with Vivian Aldridge dating back 8 months. Hotel receipts, eyewitness accounts, photographs. This establishes a pattern of infidelity that preceded any claimed marital problems." Lucas didn't even blink. "We have documentation as well." He slid a folder across the table. Diane opened it, and Becca watched her lawyer's face go carefully blank. "What is this?" Diane asked. "Photographs of Mrs. Barrett meeting with a male colleague from her former employer. Multiple occasions over the past 2 months. Coffee shops, restaurants, one evening at his apartment." Lucas's voice was professionally neutral. "We have testimony from witnesses who observed intimate behavior between them." Becca's stomach dropped. "That's Nathan Reeves. He's gay and married. We worked together 5 years ago. We're friends." "The photos tell a different story," Lucas said, along with testimony from Mr. Barrett's doorman, who noted that Mrs. Barrett had become increasingly erratic in recent months. Mood swings, late-night outings she couldn't explain, confrontational behavior. "This is ridiculous," Diane snapped. "You're creating a false narrative." "We're presenting an alternative timeline," Lucas interrupted smoothly. "One where Mrs. Barrett's infidelity and instability prompted Mr. Barrett to reconsider their marriage. A narrative that will be very compelling in court, especially given Mrs. Barrett's recent deletion of all her social media accounts, behavior consistent with someone trying to hide evidence." Becca felt like she was drowning. The photos were real, her having coffee with Nathan, laughing at his jokes. But the context was completely wrong. Nathan was helping her process the divorce, giving her advice about lawyers. There was nothing romantic about it, but looking at the photos, stripped of context, it looked damning. "Here's our offer," Lucas said, producing another document. "Mr. Barrett will provide a $500,000 settlement, full medical coverage for the pregnancy and birth. In exchange, Mrs. Barrett signs a comprehensive NDA, relinquishes all parental rights, and agrees not to pursue any further legal action." "Parental rights," Dan's voice went ice cold. "You want her to give up custody of her own child? Given her documented instability and infidelity, we believe it's in the child's best interest." Lucas folded his hands. "Mr. Barrett is willing to be generous despite Mrs. Barrett's behavior, but this offer expires at 5 p.m. today. After that, we'll file these allegations publicly and pursue full custody on the grounds that Mrs. Barrett is an unfit mother." Becca finally found her voice. "You're blackmailing me." Jordan looked up from his phone for the first time, his eyes cold. "I'm protecting my child from a mother who clearly isn't stable enough to raise it. Take the deal. Becca, don't make this worse than it needs to be. Your child," her voice cracked. "3 days ago you called this baby a complication." "That's not how I remember that conversation, boss," Jordan said calmly. "I believe I expressed concern about your mental health and your ability to handle the responsibilities of motherhood. My lawyers have documented my attempts to get you psychiatric help, which you repeatedly refused. It was like watching someone rewrite history in real time. Every conversation, every moment, twisted until she was the villain and he was the concerned husband trying to help his troubled wife." "Don't sign anything," Diane said quietly to Becca. "This is coercion. We'll fight this." Lucas smiled. "Ms. Fletcher, I'm sure you're aware that Mr. Barrett has 3 former federal judges on retainer as expert witnesses. We have the resources to bury Mrs. Barrett in legal fees until she has nothing left. This settlement is her best option." "You're a monster," Becca whispered, staring at Jordan. "I'm a father protecting his child," Jordan replied. "Sign the papers, Becca, or I'll destroy whatever's left of your reputation." Becca stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "I need air." She walked out of the conference room, Diane following. In the hallway, her lawyer put a hand on her shoulder. "They're bluffing." "Are they? Did you see those photos? They look terrible. And if he files those allegations publicly, My mother will see them. My brother. Everyone I know. Which is why they're using them as leverage. Becca, if you sign those papers, you lose your child. Forever. Is that really what you want? Becca thought about the baby growing inside her, the tiny heartbeat she'd heard at her last ultrasound. Impossibly fast and strong. Jordan's baby. Yes, but also hers. The only good thing left from the wreckage of her marriage. No, she said. I'm not signing. Then we fight, and it's going to get him ugly. They went back into the conference room. Becca looked Jordan straight in the eye and said, I'm not giving up my baby. Not for any amount of money. Not ever. Jordan's expression didn't change. Then you've made your choice. 2 days later, the photos hit page 6. The headline, Hedge Fund Wife's Secret Affair. Jordan Barrett's ex caught with mystery man. The article was devastating. It included statements from anonymous sources close to the couple, describing Becca's alleged mental health issues, her paranoid accusations about Jordan's fidelity, her obsessive behavior when he worked late. Within hours, the story went viral. Twitter exploded with hot takes. Becca became a trending topic. At Gold Digger. Had crazy wife. Had Team Jordan. Her phone rang nonstop. Unknown numbers. Private calls. She stopped answering after the third death threat. Paige found her curled up on the bathroom floor that night, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe. He's destroying me, Becca gasped. Everything I am. Everything I've ever been. He's erasing it all. No, Paige said fiercely, holding her. He's trying to. There's a difference. We're going to fight this, Becca. We're going to find the truth and shove it down his throat. But Becca knew the truth didn't matter anymore. Jordan had already won the narrative. The whole world believed she was the villain in their story. And the worst part? She was starting to believe it too. Silas Sutton arrived at LaGuardia Airport with a single backpack and a laptop case, looking exactly like what he was, a 32-year-old hacker who'd spent 6 years learning every secret the NSA didn't want anyone to know. Becca met him at baggage claim, and he took one look at her hollow-eyed, too thin, wearing the same clothes she'd had on yesterday, and pulled her into a hug that made her finally feel safe for the first time in a week. Where is he? Silas asked. Where's the penthouse? You're not going to confront him. Watch me. Joe. Silas. Becca grabbed his arm. He has lawyers. Security. You go near him. He'll have you arrested. Her brother's jaw tightened. Then I'll destroy him another way. They went to Paige's apartment, where Silas set up his laptop on the coffee table and started typing with the focused intensity Becca remembered from when he used to hack their neighbor's Wi-Fi in high school, just to prove he could. Tell me about his company, Silas said. Quantum Edge Trading. What do they do? Algorithmic trading, high-frequency stuff. Jordan built some kind of proprietary system that makes trades in microseconds. I don't really understand it. You don't need to. I do. Silas pulled up screens of code Becca couldn't begin to decipher. NSA taught me to build trading systems. Also taught me how to break them. Quantum Edge uses architecture I helped develop. I know every backdoor, every weakness, every place they cut corners for speed. You're going to hack his company. Becca's stomach twisted. That's illegal. You could go to prison. Only if I get caught. Silas looked up, and his eyes were hard. Becca, this guy threw you out pregnant. He's trying to take custody of your baby. He's destroying your reputation on national media. You think I'm going to sit back and let that happen? You think mom and dad raised me to be that kind of man? I don't want you to ruin your life for me. I'm not ruining my life. I'm using my skills to level a playing field that's currently tilted about 90 degrees against you. He turned back to his laptop. Give me 72 hours. I'll make Jordan Barrett wish he'd treated you better. Paige came in carrying Chinese takeout. I have updates. My editor approved a deep dive investigation into Quantum Edge's business practices. I've been digging into their SEC filings, and there's some weird stuff. Trades that don't make sense. Patterns that look suspiciously like front-running. Front-running, Becca asked. It's when traders use non-public information to make trades before big orders hit the market. Highly illegal. If I can prove Quantum Edge has been doing it, Jordan's not just looking at divorce problems. He's looking at federal charges. Silas and Paige exchanged a look. We need someone on the inside, Silas said. someone who has access to Quantum Edge's internal systems. Owen Hartley, Becca said reluctantly. Jordan's COO. He's been his best friend since college, but he's also, she hesitated. He's always been kind to me. When Jordan was working late, Owen would check in, make sure I was okay. I don't know if he'd help, but he might. Worth a shot, Paige said. I'll reach out. Journalists have ways of making confidential sources feel safe. Over the next 3 days, Becca watched her brother wage a war she barely understood. He worked 18-hour days, living on coffee and Red Bull, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He wouldn't tell her details. Plausible deniability, he said, but she caught glimpses of his screens. Code, market data. Quantum Edge's trading patterns being analyzed and pulled apart. On the third day, Paige came home with a flash drive. Owen Hartley met me. He wouldn't go on record, but he gave me this internal emails showing Jordan knew about the front running, encouraged it, called it aggressive but legal trading strategies in meetings with investors. Silas took the flash drive, plugged it in, and started copying files. This is good. This is really good. There's more, Paige said. Owen told me about the merger with Aldrich Capital. Apparently, Grant Aldrich has been having doubts. Vivian's pushing hard for it, but her father's old school. He doesn't like Jordan's methods, thinks he's too reckless. Can we use that, Becca asked. Maybe, if Jordan's company starts showing weakness, Aldrich might pull out of the merger entirely, which would destroy Jordan's entire plan. That night, Silas launched his attack. Becca didn't see it happen. He sent her out of the apartment, told her to have dinner with her mother, establish an alibi. But when she came back 3 hours later, her brother was staring at his laptop screen with grim satisfaction. What did you do? She asked. I didn't hack anything, Silas said carefully. I just made Quantum Edge's algorithms see patterns that aren't there, introduce subtle distortions in their market data feeds. By tomorrow morning, their trades will start losing money. Not much at first, just enough to be noticeable. They'll know it's you. They'll suspect it's me. But proving it impossible, I used NSA-level encryption and routed everything through servers in 17 different countries. By the time this tech team figures out what's happening, I'll have moved on to phase 2. What's phase 2? Silas smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. Paige's article exposing the front-running, scheduled to drop in the Wall Street Journal tomorrow at 6 a.m. By the time Jordan wakes up, his reputation will be in ruins, and his company will be bleeding money he can't stop. Becca sat down heavily. This is really happening. This is justice happening, Silas corrected. Jordan Barrett thought he could throw away his family with no consequences. He was wrong. The next morning, the Wall Street Journal's front page carried Paige's byline, Quantum Edge trading success built on illegal strategies. The article was devastating. It laid out a pattern of suspicious trades, emails from Jordan encouraging aggressive tactics that skirted legality, and testimony from anonymous sources inside the company. Paige had been careful everything was sourced, verified, legally airtight. But the implications were clear. Quantum Edge had been breaking rules for years. By 9 a.m., Quantum Edge's stock had dropped 15%. By noon, they'd lost $500 million in market value. And Jordan Barrett's phone was ringing nonstop with angry investors demanding explanations. Becca watched the financial news from Paige's couch, her brother beside her, and felt something she hadn't felt in weeks, hope. Is it wrong that I'm happy about this? She asked. No, Silas said. It's justice, and we're just getting started. The FBI arrived at Silas Sutton's hotel room at 5:30 in the morning with a warrant and enough tactical gear to suggest they thought he was a terrorist rather than a programmer. Silas Sutton, you're under arrest for violations of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes, the lead agent announced as they handcuffed him. You have the right to remain silent. Becca got the call from Silas's attorney at 6:15. By 7, she was at the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan, watching her brother be arraigned on charges that carried a maximum sentence of 20 years in federal prison. The prosecutor was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a sharper voice. Your Honor, Mr. Sutton is a former NSA contractor with sophisticated hacking skills. He's accessed secure financial systems, manipulated trading algorithms, and caused significant financial damage to a legitimate business. The government requests remand without bail given the defendant's skills and flight risk. Silas's lawyer, a public defender, who looked about 12, tried to argue for release. My client denies all charges and has cooperated fully with law enforcement. The judge set bail at $500,000. Becca didn't have $500,000. She didn't have $50,000. Not anymore. Her savings were gone, eaten up by lawyers and living expenses since Jordan had frozen their joint accounts. She sat in the courtroom gallery, watching her brother be led away in handcuffs, and felt the final piece of her hope shatter. Her phone buzzed. Lucas Brennan. Mrs. Barrett, I assume you've heard about your brother's arrest. Unfortunately, this complicates your own legal situation considerably. However, Mr. Barrett is willing to make a generous offer, drop all divorce claims, sign the NDA, and he'll personally post your brother's bail. He'll even hire proper legal representation for Mr. Sutton. All he asks in return is full custody of the child and your complete silence about your marriage. Becca's hands shook as she held the phone. He set this up. Jordan turned Silas into the FBI. I can neither confirm nor deny. He's blackmailing me with my brother's freedom. He's offering to help your brother avoid a lengthy federal prison sentence. I'd suggest you think very carefully about this opportunity. Mrs. Barrett, you have 24 hours to decide. The line went dead. Becca sat in the courthouse hallway, people streaming past her, and tried to breathe through the panic. If she signed, Silas went free, but she'd lose her baby forever. Jordan would have full custody, would raise their child to be just like him, cold, calculating, willing to sacrifice anyone for success. If she didn't sign, Silas faced 20 years in prison. Because of her, because he tried to protect her. Her phone rang again. Her mother. Becca, I just saw the news about Silas. Marlene Sutton's voice was tight with controlled panic. They're saying he hacked a major financial firm. That's not true, is it? Tell me that's not true. Becca couldn't speak, couldn't force words past the grief and guilt choking her throat. Becca, honey, are you there? It's my fault, Mom, all of it. Jordan destroyed him because Silas tried to help me. I should never have. Her voice broke. I should never have called him. There was a long pause. Then her mother said, with the steel Becca remembered from when Marlene had been a public defender taking on impossible cases. Listen to me very carefully. Your brother is a grown man who made his own choices. He knew the risks. And whatever Jordan Barrett is offering you right now, and I know he's offering you something, don't you dare take it. Don't you dare let him win by making you give up your child. But Silas would never forgive you if you sacrificed your baby for him. Never. Do you understand me? Her mother's voice softened. Baby, I know you're scared. I know everything seems hopeless right now. But your father used to say that the darkest hour is just before dawn. Hold on a little longer. Please. After they hung up, Becca sat on a courthouse bench and tried to find the strength her mother believed she had. She thought about her baby 17 weeks along now, starting to move. Tiny flutters she felt when she was very still. She thought about letting Jordan raise that child alone. Teach that child that people were just as sits to be managed or discarded. She couldn't do it, no matter what it cost. Her phone rang a third time. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Mrs. Barrett, this is Harper Finch. I worked at Quantum Edge as a junior analyst. The voice was young, female, frightened. I need to talk to you. It's about your husband, about things he's done, but not over the phone. Can we meet? Who gave you my number? Paige Donovan, the journalist. She said you needed help. And Harper's voice dropped to a whisper. I have evidence, real evidence, about everything. They met 2 hours later at a coffee shop in Brooklyn, far from Manhattan's financial district. Harper Finch was 25, red-haired, looked like she hadn't slept in days. She handed Becca a flash drive with shaking hands. I'm the one who created those fake photos of you, Harper said without preamble. The ones that made it look like you were having an affair. Jordan ordered me to do it. Told me if I didn't, I'd be fired and blacklisted in the industry. I'm so sorry. I was scared. I needed the job. I didn't think about what it would do to you. You faked those photos. Becca stared at her. Not just those. There are others, dozens of them, of other women, Jordan's done this before, gotten rid of girlfriends, business rivals, anyone who got in his way. He has files on everyone, blackmail material, evidence he manufactures when he doesn't have real leverage. It's all on that drive. Everything. Becca's hands closed around the flash drive. Why are you telling me this? Because I can't live with what I've done. And because yesterday, Jordan tried to order me to create false evidence that your brother actually did hack Quantum Edge's systems. Wanted me to plant digital fingerprints that would guarantee a conviction. Harper's eyes filled with tears. I won't do it. I won't send an innocent man to prison, even if it cost me my career. Harper. There's more on that drive. Internal emails showing Jordan knew about the front running long before it went public. Evidence of him manipulating stock prices, bribing SEC officials. Everything. I've been documenting it for months, ever since I realized what kind of man I was working for. She stood. Give it to the journalist. Tell her everything. I'll testify if I have to. But I'm done being Jordan Barrett's accomplice. After Harper left, Becca sat alone in the coffee shop, holding the flash drive like it was a grenade, which, in a way, it was. This was the evidence they needed, not just for her divorce, but to destroy Jordan completely. Federal crimes, securities fraud, conspiracy. She called Paige. We need to meet, Becca said. Right now, I have something that's going to change everything. The Wall Street Journal's newsroom at midnight had the feverish energy of a place where history was being made. Paige Donovan sat at her desk surrounded by monitors, each displaying different sections of Harper Finch's evidence, while her editor paced behind her, reading over her shoulder. This is Pulitzer material, the editor muttered. If we can verify even half of this, I've verified 80%, Paige interrupted. Cross-referenced the emails with SEC filings, interviewed 3 other Quantum Edge employees off the record who confirmed Jordan Barrett's practices, and have signed testimony from Harper Finch. She's willing to go on record with everything. Becca watched from a visitor's chair, exhausted but unable to look away. The past 18 hours had been a whirlwind of phone calls, meetings with lawyers, coordination with federal prosecutors who'd suddenly become very interested in Jordan Barrett once they saw Harper's evidence. The flash drive contained everything. Years of Jordan's schemes, fake evidence manufactured against business rivals, bribes paid to regulatory officials, systematic manipulation of trading algorithms to front-run major institutional orders. There were emails where Jordan explicitly ordered Harper to create the fake photos of Becca's alleged affair, messages discussing how to neutralize Silas by tipping off the FBI. And there was one more thing, a communication chain between Jordan and Vivian Aldridge that made Becca's blood run cold. Jordan to Vivian, 6 months ago. Wife becoming a problem. Need to accelerate timeline. Vivian's response, father won't approve merger without family stability. Solve your domestic situation first. Jordan working on it. We'll have separation agreement finalized within 90 days. We can announce engagement immediately after. Vivian, and if she fights Jordan, then I'll destroy her credibility. I've done it before. The email showed cold calculation. Every step of Jordan's betrayal had been planned, coordinated, timed for maximum efficiency. Their marriage hadn't failed. It had been assassinated. The piece goes live at 6 a.m., Paige's editor decided. Front page, above the fold. We're calling it The Algorithm of Deception, how Jordan Barrett built an empire on fraud and manipulation. Legal's already signed off. This is airtight. Paige turned to Becca. You should go home, get some sleep. By tomorrow morning, the world's going to look very different. But Becca couldn't sleep. She went back to Paige's apartment, paced the living room, checked her phone every 5 minutes. At 5:30 a.m., she gave up and turned on the TV, watching financial news channels as they prepared for the market open. At exactly 6 a.m., the Wall Street Journal's website updated. Becca refreshed her phone and saw the headline. Below it, a photo of Jordan at a gala, smiling that perfect smile that had first made her fall in love with him. The article was 12,000 words long. It was devastation in digital form. By 6:15 every major news outlet had picked up the story. By 6:30, Quantum Edge's board had called an emergency meeting. By 7 a.m., Jordan Barrett's world was on fire. Becca watched it all unfold on live television. Financial analysts discussing the implications, legal experts predicting criminal charges, former Quantum Edge employees coming forward with their own stories of Jordan's manipulation and cruelty. At 8:30, the SEC announced a formal investigation into Quantum Edge trading and its founder. At 9 a.m., Grant Aldridge held a press conference. The old man looked tired but resolute as he faced the cameras. The Aldridge family has reviewed the serious allegations against Jordan Barrett and Quantum Edge Trading. After careful consideration, we are immediately terminating all merger discussions. Furthermore, my daughter Vivian has ended her personal relationship with Mr. Barrett. The Aldridge name stands for integrity, and we will not associate with anyone who has allegedly engaged in the practices described in today's reporting. Vivian stood beside her father, perfectly composed, and said, "I was deceived about the nature of Mr. Barrett's character and business practices. I deeply regret my involvement with him and apologize to Rebecca Barrett for any pain I may have caused her. It was a masterclass in self-preservation. The Aldridges were throwing Jordan overboard to save themselves. But Becca didn't care about their motives. She cared that the merger was dead." Her phone rang. Diane Fletcher, her divorce attorney. "Turn on CNBC," Diane said. Becca switched channels and saw Jordan being led out of the Quantum Edge offices by FBI agents. He was in handcuffs, his perfect hair disheveled, his expensive suit rumpled. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Jordan Barrett has been arrested on multiple counts of securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy, the news anchor announced. If convicted, he faces up to 20 years in federal prison. Becca sank onto the couch, watching the man who'd thrown her out pregnant now doing a perp walk for the whole world to see. She thought she'd feel triumph, vindication, joy. Instead, she just felt tired and sad for who she'd thought he was. Her phone rang again. This time it was an unknown number, but something made her answer. "Becca," Jordan's voice was hoarse, defeated. "I get one phone call. I'm using it to talk to you." "Why?" She couldn't keep the coldness from her voice. "Because I need you to know I never meant for it to go this far. I thought I was building something great, an empire. I thought that justified everything. But I was wrong. About all of it. You tried to take my baby. You tried to send my brother to prison. You destroyed my reputation. I know." His voice cracked. "I know what I am now, what I've become, and I know you'll never forgive me. But I'm calling to tell you that I'm dropping all custody claims. The divorce can proceed however you want. I won't fight you." Becca closed her eyes. "Why?" "Because you were right. That day in the penthouse when you asked what happened to me. The truth is, I don't know. Somewhere between building the company and chasing success, I stopped being human. And you were the last person who saw me as anything other than a balance sheet." He paused. "I hope our child grows up to be like you. Kind, strong, nothing like me." The line went dead. Becca sat holding the phone, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she cried. Not from fear or pain, but from release. It was over. The war was over. 2 hours later, she got the call from Silas's lawyer. All charges against her brother had been dropped. The FBI had bigger fish to fry now, and Harper Finch's testimony had made it clear that Silas hadn't actually hacked Quantum Edge's systems. The failures had been internal incompetence that Jordan had blamed on him. Silas called her from outside the detention center. "I'm free. You're free. We won, sis." "Yeah," Becca said, looking at her reflection in Paige's bathroom mirror, seeing a woman who'd survived a war. "We did." 6 months later, Rebecca Sutton, she'd reclaimed her maiden name, stood in the nursery of a modest brownstone in Brooklyn, painting the walls a soft yellow while her daughter kicked enthusiastically inside her belly. "You're going to love this room," she said to her stomach. "It's not a penthouse, but it's real. It's ours." The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks ago. Jordan had signed everything Diane Fletcher put in front of him without a fight. Becca got a $10 million settlement from the recovered Quantum Edge assets, money the SEC had allowed her to claim before the rest was seized to pay back defrauded investors. It was more than enough to buy this brownstone, set up a trust fund for her daughter, and start fresh. Jordan was awaiting trial. His lawyers were negotiating a plea deal, but he was looking at minimum 8 years in federal prison. Quantum Edge had been dissolved, its assets sold off to pay settlements. Everything Jordan had built was gone. Becca didn't follow his case anymore. She'd closed that chapter of her life. Instead, she was writing a new one. The doorbell rang. Harper Finch stood on the stoop, looking nervous and hopeful. "Hi, I know I'm early, but I brought coffee. Decaf for you." "Come in." Becca led her up to the second floor, where she'd set up a small office. "So, Victor, what do you think?" Harper looked around at the plans taped to the walls, business proposals, legal structures, mission statements. "The Sutton Foundation. You're really doing this. Legal aid for women fighting wealthy exes in divorce court, free representation, resources, counseling, everything I wish I'd had at the beginning." Becca placed a hand on her stomach. "Jordan tried to use his money and power to erase me. I'm going to make sure no other woman faces that alone. And you want me to run operations?" Harper still sounded disbelieving. "You understand how these men think, how they manipulate systems, manufacture evidence, use fear as a weapon? That makes you the perfect person to help their victims fight back." Becca smiled. "Besides, you saved my life when you came forward. Let me give you a chance to save others." Harper's eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve this. After what I did to you, you made a mistake. Then you fixed it. That's what matters." Becca handed her a folder. "This is our first case. A woman in Connecticut whose tech CEO husband is trying to get her declared mentally incompetent so he can take sole custody of their 3 kids. Sound familiar?" Harper opened the folder, and Becca saw the steel enter her eyes. "What do you need me to do?" "Whatever it takes to win." Over the next weeks, the Sutton Foundation took shape. Becca recruited Diane Fletcher as lead counsel. Paige Donovan joined the board of directors. Silas built their cybersecurity systems pro bono and trained their staff on digital evidence gathering. Marlene Sutton, recovered from her stroke, came out of retirement to supervise their legal aid clinic. "Your father would be proud," she told Becca one afternoon, watching her daughter coordinate 3 different divorce cases simultaneously while 8 months pregnant. "You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into something that helps people." "Jordan was right about one thing," Becca said. "I didn't understand his world when I married him, but I understand it now. I know how these men operate, how they weaponize wealth and power, and I know how to fight them." Their first case went to trial in August. The Connecticut tech CEO had all the same tactics Jordan had used: manufactured evidence, paid expert witnesses, armies of lawyers. But the Sutton Foundation had something he didn't expect: Harper Finch's intimate knowledge of how corporate executives manufactured false digital trails. They won full custody to the mother, restraining order against the father, and a precedent-setting judgment that manufactured evidence in custody cases constituted criminal fraud. The press coverage was massive. Suddenly, the Sutton Foundation was getting calls from women all over the country, wives of hedge fund managers, tech founders, corporate lawyers, all facing the same playbook Jordan had used. Rich men who thought their wealth made them untouchable. Becca proved them wrong. One case at a time, in September, she went into labor. Stella Marlene Sutton was born on a Tuesday morning, 7 pounds and 3 ounces of perfect, screaming life. Becca held her daughter for the first time and felt a love so fierce it was almost frightening. "You're going to grow up knowing your mother is strong," Becca whispered to Stella. "That she fought for you, and that no matter what anyone tells you about your father, you were always wanted, always loved." Silas stood in the doorway of the hospital room, videoing the moment on his phone. "Mom and Dad are on their way. They're bringing in enough baby stuff to supply a small army." "That sounds about right." Becca couldn't stop staring at her daughter's face. "Silas, thank you for everything. That's what brothers are for, destroying billionaires who hurt their sisters." He grinned. "Though I have to say, you finished the job pretty thoroughly yourself." 3 months later, Time magazine named Becca one of their 100 most influential people. The article described her journey from abandoned wife to advocate for women's rights in high-net-worth divorces. It mentioned Jordan only in passing. He'd become a footnote in her story rather than the defining chapter. The day the magazine came out, Becca received a letter, prison mail, postmarked from FCI Otisville, where Jordan was serving his sentence. She almost threw it away unread, but curiosity made her open it. "Becca, I saw the Time article. You look happy." Stella looks beautiful. Thank you for sending the photo through my lawyer. I don't deserve to see her, but I'm grateful. I'm writing because I want you to know that I've had a lot of time to think in here about who I was and who I became. I told myself I was building an empire, but really I was just feeding an addiction to power. I lost sight of everything that mattered. You asked me once, what happened to Anitomin? The answer is I chose money over humanity, and I kept choosing it until I destroyed everything real in my life. I know you'll never forgive me. I'm not asking you to, but I want Stella to know someday that her father realized too late what he'd thrown away. And that the best thing I ever did, the only truly good thing, was that I gave you your freedom. You've built something beautiful from the ashes I left behind. The foundation is helping people. You're changing lives. That's a better legacy than anything I ever created. Take care of our daughter. Teach her to be strong like you. And if she ever asks about me, tell her the truth, that I was a man who had everything and lost it because I didn't know what everything meant. Jordan Becca read the letter twice, then filed it away in a box marked, "For Stella, when she's older." She didn't write back. There was nothing left to say. Jordan had made his choices, and so had she. Her choice was to move forward, to build a life defined not by what he'd taken from her, but by what she'd created from the wreckage. She had her daughter, her family, her foundation, her purpose, and that was more than enough. The letter arrived at the Sutton Foundation on a gray November morning, delivered by private courier. The return address was Aldridge Capital, and it was addressed to Rebecca Sutton personally. Becca stared at it for a full minute before opening it, wondering what Vivian Aldridge could possibly want after 10 months of silence. Inside was a handwritten note on expensive stationery and a cashier's check for $1 million. Rebecca, I know an apology is inadequate given the role I played in your suffering. I allowed myself to be complicit in Jordan's cruelty because it served my ambitions. That's a guilt I'll carry always. I'm writing to tell you that when my father announced his retirement last month, I was offered the CEO position at Aldridge Capital. I accepted on the condition that I could remake the company culture from the ground up. No more tolerating men like Jordan Barrett. No more looking the other way when brilliant men lack basic decency. The enclosed donation is for the Sutton Foundation. I hope it helps you continue the work you're doing. Beyond that, I want to offer the resources of Aldridge Capital's legal department, pro bono support for your cases, whatever you need. I can't undo the harm I caused, but I can try to ensure other women don't face what you faced. If you're willing to meet, I'd like to discuss how we might work together. If not, I understand. Vivian Aldridge. Becca set down the letter, her mind racing. $1 million would fund operations for 2 years. Access to Aldridge Capital's legal team, some of the best corporate lawyers in the country, would be transformative. They could take on bigger cases, more complex fights. But Vivian had been Jordan's accomplice. The other woman. Could Becca really work with her? Harper knocked on the office door. Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Becca handed her the letter. Harper read it, eyes widening. Wow, that's actually genuine. I think so, but I don't know if I can trust her. Maybe you don't have to trust her. Maybe you just have to decide if working with her helps the women we're trying to protect. Harper sat down across from Becca. Look, Vivian was complicit, but she also walked away when she learned the truth. And now she's offering real resources. That's not nothing. Becca thought about the cases stacked on her desk. Women who needed help they couldn't afford. Legal battles they were losing because they couldn't match their husband's resources. How many could they save with $1 million with access to elite corporate lawyers? She picked up her phone and called the number at the bottom of Vivian's letter. Vivian answered on the second ring. Rebecca, thank you for calling. I read your letter. I have questions. I'd expect nothing less. Can we meet coffee, lunch, whatever makes you comfortable? They met the next day at a cafe in Midtown, neutral territory. Vivian looked different from the polished executive Becca remembered from that charity dinner a lifetime ago. She wore less makeup, simpler clothes. Her expression was guarded, but sincere. I need to know why, Becca said without preamble. Why help me now? Vivian stirred her coffee, choosing words carefully. When I was 23, I dated a man my father didn't approve of. A musician. Not wealthy, not connected. My father made that relationship impossible, used his influence to destroy the man's career. drove him out of New York. I let it happen because I told myself ambition mattered more than love. She looked up, meeting Becca's eyes. I spent the next decade becoming exactly what my father wanted. Ruthless, strategic, willing to sacrifice anything for success. Jordan Barrett was a mirror of who I'd become. That's why I was attracted to him. We were both people who'd traded our humanity for power. And something changed. I saw your daughter's photo, the one in Time magazine. You holding Stella, looking at her with such fierce love. And I realized I'm 35 years old. I've built a career, earned respect, accumulated wealth. But I've never looked at anything the way you look at your child. I've never felt anything that real. Vivian's voice was quiet now, almost confessional. I can't have that. I made my choices, closed those doors, but I can help other women keep their doors open. That's not redemption. I don't deserve redemption. It's just the only meaningful thing left for me to do. Though Becca studied her across the table, Vivian wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wasn't making excuses. She was simply offering resources from a place of genuine regret. Here's my condition, Becca said finally. You don't do this for redemption or to feel better about yourself. You do it because it's right. And if you ever use your association with my foundation to rehabilitate your public image, I'll expose you publicly. Understood. Understood. Vivian extended her hand. Partners. Becca shook it, the grip firm. Partners. But Vivian, I'm never going to like you. I wouldn't expect you to. I don't like myself most days. Vivian's smile was rueful. But maybe we can help some people anyway. Over the next months, their unlikely alliance transformed the Sutton Foundation. With Aldridge Capital's resources, they took on cases they'd never have been able to fight. A California woman whose venture capitalist husband tried to have her involuntarily committed. A Texas woman whose oil executive spouse was hiding assets in offshore accounts. A New York woman whose hedge fund manager ex was using parental alienation tactics. They won most of them. The ones they lost, they learned from. By Stella's first birthday, the Sutton Foundation had helped 347 women win custody cases against wealthy exes. They'd secured over $500 million in settlements for women who'd been lowballed or threatened into silence. They'd gotten 12 men charged with perjury or evidence tampering. The statistics were impressive. But Becca's favorite metric was simpler: 347 women who got to keep their children. 347 families that stayed together. At Stella's birthday party held in the brownstone's small backyard, attended by family and the foundation's staff, Becca watched her daughter smash cake into her face and felt a contentment she'd never experienced in the Tribeca penthouse. Silas stood beside her, balancing a paper plate. You know what's wild? A year ago, you were losing everything. Now you're changing the world. Not the world, just my corner of it. Still counts. He bumped her shoulder. Dad would have been proud. You turned pain into purpose. Becca thought about that phrase. Turned pain into purpose. It was true, in a way. Jordan had tried to destroy her, and she'd used the rubble to build something that helped people. But it wasn't the pain that made her strong. It was the choice to keep fighting when everything seemed hopeless. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I just left my husband. He's threatened to take our kids. A friend gave me your number. Please help. Becca showed Silas. This is what I do now. Every day, someone reaches out. Every day, another woman who needs help. And every day, you show her she's not alone. Silas smiled. That's your superpower, sis. You survived, and now you make sure others survive too. So that night, after the party ended and guests went home, Becca sat in Stella's nursery and rocked her daughter to sleep. Through the window, she could see Brooklyn's lights, ordinary and beautiful. Not the commanding view from a penthouse, but something better, something real. Your daddy made a lot of mistakes, she whispered to Stella. But he gave me you, and that means something good came from all the pain. Stella yawned and settled against her chest, tiny fingers curling around Becca's thumb. I'm going to teach you to be strong. Becca continued softly, to never let anyone make you feel small, to use your power to help people, not hurt them. And I'm going to make sure you always know you were wanted, that you were loved, that you were worth fighting for. She kissed Stella's forehead and closed her eyes. breathing in that sweet baby smell, and felt something she thought she'd lost forever: peace. Jordan had tried to erase her. Instead, she'd become unforgettable. 2 years after Stelta's birth, Rebecca Sutton received an email from Jordan Barrett's lawyer requesting a meeting. The message was brief, professional, and surprising. Jordan was up for early parole and wanted Becca's input on his custody petition. She almost deleted it. Then she thought about Stella, now a toddler with Jordan's dark hair and Becca's stubborn determination, and decided that some conversations, however uncomfortable, were necessary for her daughter's sake. They met in a conference room at the lawyer's office, neutral ground, supervised, appropriate for two people whose relationship had been defined by betrayal and destruction. Jordan walked in wearing prison khakis, looking thinner and older than Becca remembered. Prison had carved lines into his face that weren't there before. So had remorse, if that's what she was seeing in his eyes. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly, sitting across from her with his hands folded on the table. "I wasn't sure you would. I'm here for Stella, not for you." "I know." He took a breath. "My lawyer said I'm likely to get parole next month. I've served 3 years of an 8-year sentence. Model prisoner. Completed every rehabilitation program available. The parole board thinks I've been reformed." "Have you?" Jordan considered the question seriously. "I don't know if reformed is the right word. I'm different. I understand what I did wrong, not just legally, but morally. I spent 3 years with nothing but time to think about who I was and who I became. It's not a comfortable process." Becca studied him, trying to reconcile this thoughtful, almost humble man with the cold stranger who'd thrown her out pregnant. "What do you want, Jordan?" "I want to meet my daughter. Not custody. I know I don't deserve that. Just supervised visits. A chance to be her father, even if only for a few hours a month. She deserves to know I exist as more than just the villain in her mother's story." "Why should I agree to that? You called her a complication. You tried to take her from me completely." "Because she's not me, and she's not you. She's herself, and she might want to know her father someday. Might have questions I'm the only one who can answer." Jordan's voice was steady but not demanding. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Becca. I'm asking for a chance to show Stella that people can change, that mistakes don't define you if you do the work to become better." Becca thought about the women she'd helped through the Sutton Foundation. How many of them struggled with this exact question? How much access to give fathers who'd been destructive? There were no easy answers, just messy, complicated human situations that required wisdom and mercy in equal measure. "I'll agree to supervise visits," she said finally. "One Saturday a month, 3 hours, at a family center with counselors present. If you ever miss a visit, show up intoxicated, or say anything to Stella that undermines her sense of security, the visits end permanently. Understood?" "Understood." Jordan's relief was visible. "Thank you. I know I don't deserve this chance." "You're right. You don't. But Stella deserves a father who tries. So try." They discussed logistics, the family center location, supervision protocols, what Jordan could and couldn't say to a 2-year-old who didn't yet understand concepts like prison or betrayal. It was civil, almost businesslike. Two adults navigating parenting arrangements despite their history. As Becca was leaving, Jordan said, "I read about the Sutton Foundation. Everything you've built. You're helping a lot of people. I'm trying. You're succeeding. And for what it's worth, I'm proud of you. I know I have no right to feel that way, but I do. You took the worst thing I ever did and turned it into something beautiful." Becca paused at the door. "Jordan, I need you to understand something. I didn't build the foundation because of you. I built it despite you. My strength didn't come from surviving what you did to me. It came from refusing to let what you did define me." "I understand." "Good. Because I need Stella to learn that too. That she's not the daughter of a criminal and a victim. She's the daughter of a woman who fought for her and a man who's trying to be better. That's the story I'm going to tell her. Don't make me rewrite it." "I won't," Jordan promised. "Whatever else I've done, whatever else I've failed at, I'll get this right. For her." The first visit happened 3 weeks later. Becca brought Stella to the family center, a cheerful space designed for supervised parent-child visits, with toys and books and counselors trained to intervene if necessary. She'd spent the previous night explaining to her daughter in age-appropriate terms that she was going to meet her daddy, that he loved her very much, and that sometimes grown-ups made mistakes but were trying to be better. Stella had mostly been excited about the new toys. Becca watched through a one-way mirror as Jordan entered the playroom. He knelt down to Stella's level, and Becca saw his hands shake as he said, "Hi, Stella. I'm your daddy." Stella, fearless and curious like her mother, walked right up to him and handed him a stuffed elephant. "Play?" "Yeah," Jordan said, his voice cracking. "Let's play." For 3 hours, Becca watched Jordan build block towers for Stella to knock down, read picture books in silly voices, and laugh at her toddler jokes that made no sense. He was patient, gentle, fully present in a way he'd never been with Becca. Prison had either changed him or revealed a capacity for tenderness she'd never seen. When the visit ended, Stella hugged Jordan goodbye, unselfconscious, innocent, not knowing she was embracing someone who'd tried to erase her mother. Jordan closed his eyes and held her like she was made of glass, and Becca saw tears on his face when Stella pulled away. "Daddy nice," Stella announced to Becca as they left. "We play again." "Yes, sweetie, once a month." "Okay." Stella skipped to the car, already moving on to the next thing, because that's what toddlers did. No baggage, no grudges, just pure presence. Becca wished she could do the same. Ashared. 6 months later, the Sutton Foundation held its annual fundraiser gala, a far cry from the charity events Becca had attended as Jordan's wife. This one was in a Brooklyn event space, not a Manhattan hotel ballroom. The guests were activists, journalists, lawyers who believed in justice over profit. The dress code was business casual, not black tie. Becca gave the keynote speech. Stella sitting in the front row with Marlene, playing with a stuffed animal and occasionally shouting, "Mama," at inappropriate moments. The audience laughed warmly each time. "3 years ago," Becca said from the podium, "I was thrown out of my home while pregnant. My ex-husband tried to take my child, destroy my reputation, and erase me from existence. He failed because I had help, a brother who fought for me, a friend who told my story, a community that refused to let me face it alone." She gestured to the room. "That's what the Sutton Foundation does. We make sure no woman faces these battles alone. We've helped over 800 men now, won custody battles, secured fair settlements, prosecuted perjury and fraud. But the number I'm proudest of, 0. That's how many women we've turned away because they couldn't afford our help." The applause was thunderous. After the speech, Vivian Aldridge approached with a woman Becca didn't recognize, late 40s, elegant, nervous energy. "Rebecca, this is Senator Catherine Brennan. She's sponsoring legislation to reform divorce law in New York." The senator shook Becca's hand firmly. "Your foundation's work has been instrumental in building support for this bill. We're requiring independent counsel for all prenuptial agreements, mandating mediation before custody battles, and creating penalties for manufacturing evidence in divorce proceedings. It's called the Fair Divorce Act, but my staff calls it the Sutton Law." Becca felt the weight of that, her pain, codified into legislation that would protect others. "When does it go to vote?" "Next month, and it's going to pass." "You've changed the conversation. Rebecca, high net worth divorces aren't invisible anymore. The men who weaponize wealth against their families, they're being held accountable. That's because of you." Later, as Becca was helping clean up after the gala, Harper found her. "There's someone outside asking to see you. Says it's important." Becca stepped out into the cool October night and found Owen Hartley standing by a street lamp, looking uncomfortable and determined. Jordan's former best friend, the COO who'd ultimately testified against him. "Owen, what are you doing here?" "I wanted you to know something." He shifted his weight. "Jordan's getting out next week. Full parole. He's been offered a job at a small financial consulting firm in Jersey. Nothing glamorous, but it's honest work. He's taking it." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm the one who recommended him for the job. And I needed you to know that I believe he's changed." Owen met her eyes. "I know what he did to you was unforgivable. I enabled it. Looked the other way when I should have spoken up. I've had to live with that. But the Jordan I've visited in prison these past 3 years, he's not the same man. He's done the work. Becca, real work on himself." That doesn't erase what he did. No, it doesn't. Nothing can. But maybe it means Stella gets to have a father who's capable of being better. Owen pulled out an envelope. He wrote this for you, asked me to deliver it after his release was confirmed, said you didn't have to read it, but he hoped you would. Becca took the envelope, and Owen left without another word. She didn't open it until she was home, Stella asleep in her crib, the brownstone quiet around her. Inside was a single handwritten page. Becca, by the time you read this, I'll be out of prison and starting over with nothing, no money, no reputation, no power. Just a job that pays $40,000 a year and a chance to be part of my daughter's life. I'm writing to tell you something I should have said 3 years ago, but didn't have the wisdom or humility to understand you were right about everything. Right that love matters more than money. Right that character matters more than success. Right that I became a monster chasing an empire that meant nothing. Prison gave me time to understand what I lost. Not the company or the wealth losing you. The only person who ever loved me for who I was rather than what I could do for them. I threw that away for a business deal and a woman who saw me as a transaction. I can't undo any of it. I can't give you back the years I stole or the pain I caused. But I can promise you that the man Stella knows will be better than the man you knew. I'll never be the father she deserves, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be good enough. Thank you for letting me try. Thank you for being stronger than that ever was. Thank you for building something beautiful from the rubble I left behind. I hope someday, when Stella's old enough to understand, you'll tell her that her father learned too late, but truly that the only empire worth building is the one you create with the people you love. Jordan Becca folded the letter and placed it in the box with the others, the archive of correspondence she was keeping for Stella. Someday her daughter would be old enough to read them, to understand the complicated story of her parents, to make her own judgments about forgiveness and redemption. For now, Becca's job was simpler. Protect Stella, love her fiercely, and teach her that strength wasn't about never falling down. It was about getting back up. She walked to Stella's room and watched her daughter sleep, curls spread across the pillow, one small hand clutching the stuffed elephant Jordan had given her at their first visit. Your story isn't about what your father did or what I survived, Becca whispered. It's about who you choose to become. And I'm going to make sure you have every choice I didn't have, every opportunity, every chance to be extraordinary. Stella stirred in her sleep, smiled at some toddler dream, and settled back into peaceful breathing. Becca thought about the question people always asked her in interviews. Do you forgive him? The truth was complicated. She didn't forgive Jordan for what he'd done. That betrayal was too fundamental, too cruel. But she'd stopped letting it define her, stopped giving him power over her story. She'd built a life she loved, a daughter who was her world, a foundation that mattered, a community that supported her. Jordan had tried to erase her and instead made her unforgettable. That wasn't forgiveness. That was victory. Final statistics. Jordan Barrett, serving 8 years in federal prison, eligible for parole 2029, Quantum Edge Trading. Dissolved, 2 IB and investor losses recovered. The Sutton Foundation helped 847 women win custody cases in first 2 years. Rebecca Sutton named Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential People, 2026. The Fair Divorce Act passed in New York, pending in 12 other states. This story is fiction, but inspired by hundreds of real cases where powerful people tried to erase those they claimed to love. The lesson: you can't erase someone who refuses to be erased. You can only make them unforgettable.